Most of you perhaps have had a chance to observe our enemies in action by seeing the Boston Globe this morning with Mr. Gordon Hall's pronouncements on the activities of some of the people that we're interested in. And I hope any of you who encounter him during the day today will perhaps take the opportunity to ask him whether in his tours around yesterday and listening to some of the speeches, he didn't find a certain amount of material which require correction in that article, and when he's going to publish the corrections in the Globe, because it's as inaccurate as most of the things he's put out, and I think all of you can be of some help in trying to bring it to his attention. I don't know, we haven't seen him around this morning, but I can't believe that he's not going to favor us with his presence again today at some point. And so I don't want to repeat too much because I think most of you were here yesterday, but I do want to say that what we're trying to do with this rally is there are two main objectives. One is to show the people of New England that it's respectable to be conservative, and on that basis, your presence here is helping us do that job. The other is to give the people who are working in conservative fields in other parts of the country or anywhere for that matter, encouragement in what you're doing and realizing that you're not functioning entirely in a vacuum, although those of us in Boston are very sympathetic to people elsewhere who have that feeling because we have a particularly uncordial atmosphere around us. And so it is working out that way. We have heard from a number of people who are here how encouraging it is to have been here and to be able to go back home with the stimulation that has come from listening to our speakers and seeing the exhibits and being part of this particular rally. And among others who has done an excellent job for us here, both in his exhibits and in his conversations with people, is our moderator of this morning, who has the responsibility for having developed the idea of Let Freedom Ring. I expect all of you know how that functions. It's a telephone dialing system where if you dial a certain number, you will get an up-to-date current message of considerable importance as to local current happenings and incidents, and with a good deal of conservative philosophy together with the news item. And it's a great satisfaction to us to have Dr. Douglas taking part in our program, and I will turn the rest of the morning program over to Dr. William C. Douglas from Florida. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be asked to moderate a program on this grand and glorious day, the 4th of July, 1965. Happy birthday to you all, your 189th, I believe it is. Our first speaker of the day will be Mr. Herman Dykema, Jr. Mr. Dykema was born and raised and educated in Illinois. He's a partner in the firm of Dykema and Dykema Public Accountants. He's a member of the Public Relations Committee, Chicago Association of Commerce. He's president of the River Forest Chamber of Commerce. He's trustee of the Christ Church of Oak Brook and a member of the board of the Arthritis Foundation, a very busy man indeed. The title of Mr. Dykema's address today will be Author of Liberty. Mr. Dykema.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Ladies and gentlemen, and fellow conservatives, it seemed especially appropriate to me that today should be the Sabbath day, and at the same time that it should be the 4th of July, the day of our national independence. And in my mind, for a long time, there has been a direct, important connection between the two. We've heard many speeches in the last 24 hours, and we will hear many more in connection with the problems of our day. And actually, the problems that these speakers have been talking about have been the problems of the world throughout all history. And they are deeply embedded in the history of the world. And that's the thing I came to talk to you about today. You are all conservatives. And as conservatives, to me it means this: you are conservative in your religion. And it means that your religious philosophies are deeply embedded in history. You are conservative in economics. And that means that your economic philosophies are deeply embedded in the history of the past in economics. And you are conservatives in your politics. And this means that in your politics you have taken a lesson from the past, and therefore your philosophies there are deeply embedded in the past. By virtue of these things, you are practical people. And by virtue of these things, I want to deal with the first subject of religion. To me, religion too must be practical to you. And I think that you must understand the practical application of religion. Now, the phenomena that you have heard the speakers speak about, the troubles of our day, are nothing new. And it took a little effort for me to recall and get hold of a rundown of this phenomena. And with the assistance of Opal Butler, who most of you know, I got this in her library. And this is what it is. And I wish I could tell you the author. The people go from chains to spiritual faith. And I want to talk about this, especially as it is, as you find it in Old Testament history. From spiritual faith, they go to courage. From courage to liberty. From liberty to abundance. From abundance to selfishness. From selfishness to complacency. And see if you don't think this is about where we are now. From complacency to apathy. From apathy to dependency. From dependency back to bondage. And so around the clock. This is what we're going to talk about in the next 40 minutes. And I want to fix your thinking on why people go into bondage. And I think if we can fix our thinking on that and know exactly the cause of it, we can better apply the remedy. There's a spiritual, eternal principle involved here. And people go from one stage to the other in very logical sequence for very logical reasons. I have a very homely illustration that might help to convey the message. It is difficult in dealing with the problems of our day to deal directly with the problems. We try to deal with it in the voting booth. We try to deal with it in our state legislatures. We try to deal with it in the Congress of the United States. We try to deal with it at all these levels. And I think if we will lift our level of dealing with it a little bit, we'll be more effective. And this is my illustration, which is a very homely one. The farmer goes out to plant. He plows, he plants, he fertilizes, he cultivates. And then what does he do? He can't do much but depend on his God. What factors affect him? The weather, the season, the temperature, and the rain. In the final analysis, he will get results only when he calls upon his God for his blessing. That's what I want to call upon you for this morning. And I'm going to quote a lot of scripture to you today in order to convey the message. Anything that I would say would be less than authority. And I hope in your minds that the holy inspired Word of God is authority, because I'm going to quote it very liberally today. And it will be the guide to what we have to say. As such, I want to quote that authority. In the beginning, this is John 14, verse 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So when God says, let there be light, there's light. That's all he needs to do. And I would also like to have you do this as we proceed to develop the point. Keep in mind the cycles of the clock we have just stated. And we're going to deal with the people of Israel in Old Testament history, and we'll start with 1 Samuel 7, verse 8. And this is prior to the time that Israel got its first king. They were governed by judges, as you know. And these judges led them in battle. They led them in their spiritual faith. They were leaders in every respect of the children of Israel. And this is what it says. And the children of Israel said to Samuel, cease not to cry unto the Lord our God for us, that he will save us out of the hand of the Philistines. They had the same trouble in those days. Wars and more wars. The people of Israel knew what it was that gave them peace or prosperity. And they asked their leader, Samuel, to call upon their God. And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it for a burnt offering, holy unto the Lord. And Samuel cried unto the Lord of Israel, and the Lord heard him. This was devotion to his God. The first thing he did was call upon his God. And unless you call upon your God, all your efforts will be totally ineffective. First of all, an acknowledgement of his power, gratitude for what he does, and worship to him. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel, but the Lord thundered with a great thunder on that day upon the Philistines and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. There is the solution to your problem. And the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and smote them until they came unto Bethkar. And do you think it was a lot of chariots and horses that did this? It was not. It was their God who did it. And Samuel took a stone. Immediately, he expresses his gratitude to the God of Israel, and he worships him. He takes a stone and set it between Mizpah and Shen, and called the name of it Ebenezer, saying, hitherto hath the Lord helped us. This acknowledgement must be present in all your efforts against the tyranny as you fight, or your efforts will never succeed. So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more unto the coast of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. This is in the record. Why don't our clergy, and I'll qualify myself here, I happen to be born a Protestant, and I'm sorry that you don't hear this in Protestant pulpits. And now, what happens to Israel? It was after Moses, who led Israel through the wilderness, died. And we're in the book of Judges now. There was continuing warfare between Israelites and the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, and many others. From time to time, God sent another deliverer, another judge, to lead his people in victory against their oppressors. You'll find a parallel in the history of Israel, all through the history of Israel. There is nothing new about the very subject that this meeting of conservatives is all about. Let me illustrate just a little bit. If you get a liberal president, what do you do as conservatives? If you get a liberal governor, what do you do? If you get a liberal Supreme Court, what do you do? Fight them on their own level? Try to impeach them? All you do is the mechanical things, and they're better armed than you are. They're in authority. Do you consult your God? Now you're better armed than they are. When you have an increase in tax, what do? Fight in the legislature or in the Congress and try to have it reduced? If the national debt is going too high, what do? What can you do? Isn't this the question you're hearing constantly? When you talk to your friends about this, they say, what can I do? Whatever it is you're doing, you have to continue to do whatever that is. You have to oppose them in every quarter. But please remember the clock. And please remember your efforts will fail. Please remember the context when I read you some more scripture. America must return to the faith of the fathers. You have heard that from the lecturers yesterday several times. But our churches have lost their faith. They're not preaching this gospel in the churches. The people have lost their faith. They don't appeal to their God. This is the vacuum that the communists have filled. They're providing an alternative, and they're trying to eliminate faith in God from your churches and from your legislature and from every vestige of the American scene. I have here a little quote from the Presbyterian publication of some kind. Churches have lost the power of the gospel. And I'm quoting from the Jacksonville, Florida Times-Union. The New Presbyterian Confession is as follows. The new credo summons Christians to speak and act in the world's affairs and singles out three immediate crises of the 20th century for such attention. 1. The struggle for racial justice. 2. International peace. 3. Relieving poverty. Where is the gospel of the blood of Christ? The church is slumming around in the gutters of the new morality. And I have one more quote. Richard C. Halverson in the Presbyterian Journal. Suppose Jesus the Christ were born in 1930. Would he appear before the United Nations, appealing to world leaders to resolve international tensions? Not any more than he appealed to Jewish, Roman, Greek, and barbarian leaders in his day. Would he seek audience with the heads of state? Not any more than he sought to influence the Emperor of Rome. Would he visit Washington, London, Paris, Bonn, Moscow, urging legislation which would solve humanity's problems? Not any more than he appealed to the Senate at Rome or the Council at Athens. Would he organize crusades against racial, international, industrial exploitations, against crime, delinquency, or alcoholism? No more than he proceeded against contemporary social evil in 25 A.D. If Jesus were to begin his redemptive work in the mid-20th century, he would do what he did 19 centuries earlier. He would choose faithful men to follow him. He would teach them, train them, and commission them to make disciples of all nations. He would baptize them in his Holy Spirit, send them forth in his power to witness his redemptive love as manifested in his death and resurrection. And by that message, in his power, he would turn the world upside down. The measure of the church's failure in the modern world is her preoccupation with social action, legislation, organization, and innumerable crusades to the neglect of the preaching of the gospel. Jesus' way is the gospel. Now let's look at the historical record of the Old Testament at the turning point in Israel's history between the judges and the time they received kings. Israel was a theocracy. It was not governed by a king. God governed his people directly. They were the chosen people of God at that time, governed by judges. They were prophets, leaders in civil affairs, in war, even in battle. And we read in 1 Samuel 8, verse 6, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' And Samuel prayed unto the Lord." Again, the first thing he does is pray to the Lord. What do we do today? Israel had its problems. And don't think they had nothing but war as their problems. They must have had the same economic problems and all the others you have spoken of constantly. What do they want now? They want a king. They want to mimic the pagan neighbors. They want to do whatever the pagans are doing. What do you think we're doing today? In verse 7, "And the Lord said to Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, they have rejected me, that I should not reign, so they also unto thee." God says they have forsaken him, and they have served other gods. In so doing, they're serving other gods. That's what the United States of America and its people have done. So, God concedes, "Hearken unto their voices," he tells Samuel, "and show them the king," but protested solemnly. He delivers the message to the people. The Lord will not forsake his people, he says, for his great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make Israel his people. And Samuel pledges himself, forbid that he should sin by not interceding in their behalf before their God. Only, again the admonition, only fear the Lord and serve him. And consider what great things he has done for them. He has brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. The clock again. "But if ye shall still do wickedly, ye shall be consumed, both ye and your king." This is a conditional consent. God has consented to their wish, but it's departure from the faith, or they will be consumed, both they and their king. And if America departs from the faith, and it's well along the road, America will be consumed, both America and its king and its entire economy. And remember this, it's not only the liberals who will be consumed, but the conservatives too. And it's not only the liberals who depart from the faith, let not the conservatives depart from the faith. And now we're under the kings. Please remember the clock. Because Israel went through these cycles again and again and again. You read them in Judges, you read it in Kings, you read it in their whole history. The wheel turns over and over again, and today we haven't learned the lesson. So they have their first king. He's anointed by God. Samuel anoints him. We're going to focus on a few cases to illustrate the point. And let this not be a message of doom, because I have comfort at the end, again quoted from Scripture. In 1 Samuel 13, Saul is a young, idealistic king. He's faithful to his God. He reigned a year, and then when he reigned 2 years, he chose 3,000 men. He took 2,000 himself and 2,000 for his son Jonathan, who led a part of the army. And all Israel, in the 4th verse of Samuel 13, heard say that Saul had smitten a garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel also was had in abomination of the Philistines. You think America is held in abomination by the Russians? And the people were called together after Saul to Gilgal. The next verse 5, and the Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and the people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude, and they came up and pitched in Michmash, eastward from Bethaven. And the 6th verse, and the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed. And the people did hide themselves in caves, thickets, rocks, and high places, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews fled to over the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead, trembling. They're waiting for the counterattack by Israel, because Samuel must come to offer sacrifice. Again, they know they must call on their God for the victory. And he, Samuel, tarried 7 days, which was the appointed time, according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. The 7 days were not yet up. Fear set in, and there was no reliance, no faith. They were afraid, and the people were running away. Not only Saul was afraid, the people were afraid. What does Saul do? He's impatient. Take matters into his own hands. And here's where he makes his mistake. And if you take our matters into your own hands, your efforts will be in vain, and I'll repeat that 1,000 times. And Saul said, bring hither a burnt offering to me, and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. He's doing it himself. He didn't have faith. He wouldn't wait till Samuel came. He's performing the mechanics. He's offering to his God in a time of stress. But it takes more than the mere mechanics of worship. And it came to pass in the 10th verse, as soon as he has made an end of offering, the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him, that he might salute him. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? And Saul said, because I saw the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash. Therefore, said I, the Philistines will come down upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. The point is, he lacked faith. The point is, he didn't trust his God. The point is, all he did is burn meat on an altar. And this was only a symbol. The point is, in his heart he should have believed and had faith. And it's on that thin line that rests the victory. And Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee, for now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. It takes patience, a repentant heart, and a humble spirit to think and know that you can't do it yourself. You've got to get on your knees and call upon your God. And what's the result? This is the 14th verse, but now thy kingdom shall not continue. And the Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. But did Saul learn? We have another case of his disobedience. And now the disobedience is a little different. We're in 1 Samuel 15, verse 1. Saul also said, Samuel also said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken then unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not. But slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. Destroy it utterly." Now let's see what he does. And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to his city of Amalek and laid wait in the valley. And Saul said unto the Kenites, "Go depart, get you down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them." The Kenites had been kind unto the Israelites after they came with Moses from their bondage. And in the 7th verse, Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, of the oxen, the fatlings, and the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them, but everything that was vile and refuse they destroyed utterly. Now he's in trouble again. Then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, "It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he is turned back from following me, and hath not performed my commandments." And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. He cried unto the Lord all night. "Therefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, but didst fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord." And Samuel said, "Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, and he hath also rejected thee from being king." And Samuel came no more to see Saul until the day of his death. And Saul dies. You might fill in the context. We'll go on to 1 Samuel 5, verse 6. David is now king. He's 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, "Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither," thinking, David cannot come in hither. Their enemy was so well fortified, the blind and the lame could defend the city. And if you'll read the context, it was well fortified, naturally as well as militarily. Nevertheless, and David is another good king, trusts in his God and boldly proceeds. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, and the same is the city of David, as simple as that. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David, and David built around about him Millo and inward. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord of God of hosts was with him. Let the Lord of God of hosts be with the United States of America. That's your only solution. David and Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees, and carpenters, and masons, and they built David a house. He has very fine foreign relations. All the foreign relations are good when you're strong and powerful. They all want to be your friend. David was strong and powerful because he was faithful to his God, and his people were faithful to his God, and the foreigners loved him. And David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people's sake. He didn't do it himself. And where do you think the prosperity of America came from? And what does David now do? And as soon as David had made an end of offering burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord of hosts. Again, he immediately credits his God and worships. And we read in the 2 Samuel 7, verse 1, it came to pass when the king sat in his house and the Lord had given him rest around about from all his enemies. Where do you think peace comes from? Verse 2, and the king said unto Nathan the prophet, See now, I dwell in an house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. He wanted to build a house of God, a temple. He was given permission through Nathan the prophet to build a house. Thus saith the Lord, Shalt thou build me an house to dwell in? In the 8th verse, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. He is the finest king, general, administrator ever. He didn't go to Harvard and Yale and West Point. In the 9th verse, and I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thine enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more as before time. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies, also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee an house. And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He has continuity. He's going to have a son sit in his throne. God will not only make him powerful, prosperous, peaceful now, he'll establish his kingdom for his posterity. And he's going to build him a house of God. And now David dies. And Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in 1 Kings 3 in a dream by night, and God said, Ask what I shall give thee. Solomon starts out as a good king. And Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, and thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne as it is his day. Gratitude to his God for the position he finds himself in. He knows wherein lies his prosperity, his liberty, and his power. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or to come in. And you and I are as little children. We don't know the remedy. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this so great a people? In 1 Kings 4, Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms, from the river unto the land of the Philistines, to the border of Egypt. And they brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. They dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan even to Beersheba. Prosperity such as the world had never known. He had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots, 12,000 horsemen. And now again, please remember the clock. And those officers provided victual for King Solomon, and all came to the king's table, every man in his month. They lacked nothing. Barley and straw for the horses, and dromedaries brought they unto the place where the officers were, every man according to his charge. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding, exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. They had a great society then. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country and all the wisdom of Egypt. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants unto Solomon, for he had heard that they had anointed him king in the room of his father, for Hiram was ever a lover of David, as we saw before. Again, fine foreign relations. The pagans don't bother you when you trust in your God. They know your God better than the Christians do most of the time. Then Solomon built the house of God, and God appeared to Solomon a second time. And the Lord said unto him in the 3rd verse of 1 Kings 9, I have heard thy prayer and thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built to put my name there forever, and mine eyes and mine heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and wilt keep my statutes and my judgments, and here is the condition again, then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, but will not keep my commandments and my statutes which I have set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them. What other gods do we serve now? Aren't we serving every god of wood and stone there is? Then will I cut off Israel from out of the land which I have given them, and this house which I have hallowed for my name will I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among all people. And in the translation you lose something. It means a taunt and a mockery is what Israel will be. And if United States of America continues, it will be a taunt and a mockery, and you know it. And this house which is high, every one that passeth it shall be astonished, and shall hiss, and they shall say, why hath the Lord done this unto this land and to this house? And now I want to just relate to you a little more contemporary history. Do you remember when Germany was a Christian nation? It was strong and powerful, and it had colonies and a great industrial empire. What happened to it? Where is it? So far we've talked about Israel, and we've seen the clock. Why do you think it is no more? Because they miscalculated in war? It's because they departed from the faith of their forefathers. England used to rule the waves. The sun never set on England. Its economy was all over the world. It was the seat of empire. London, England, was the seat of empire. If the United States borrowed money, they went to London. Where is their empire? Where are their colonies today? All the great men of the world can explain in great detail what happened. But you know, they're all wrong. They departed from the faith of the fathers. They departed from their faith in God. Do I need to tell you what's going to happen to the United States? In the 9th verse of Kings, and they shall answer, because they forsook the Lord their God, who brought forth their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and have taken hold upon other gods and have worshipped them, and served them. Therefore hath the Lord brought upon them all this evil. I won't bore you with all the details, but I'll read a little farther. It has to do with Solomon's kingdom. Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. Silver was just old iron. it had to be of gold. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish, with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom. And all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. He wrote Proverbs, the Psalms. He was a great philosopher as well. And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the cities for chariots, and with the king of Jerusalem. And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as the sycamore trees that were in the vale for abundance. Remember the clock. But King Solomon loved many strange women. Together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, and Hittites. These are pagan nations. They don't know the God of Israel. He married them. He had 1,000 wives. Shouldn't hurt to have a few of those. This is all very logical. Of the nations, and I'm reading now 1 Kings 11, verse 2, concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go in unto them, neither shall they come in unto you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. How do we get into foreign entanglements? How do we sit in council with pagan nations? What do pagan nations have to offer in council with a Christian nation? We must sit in council with our God. What are we sitting in council with Russians for, or any other pagan nations? And if not already the case, there's a majority of pagans in the UN, but we're sitting in council with pagans, and we dispense even with prayer in the UN. We are worshiping strange gods. And he had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. And Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And he lowers his moralities to the level of the pagans. In the 6th verse, Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. And in the 11th verse, wherefore the Lord said to Solomon, For as much as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my commandments and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee. I don't think I need to relate more of this. I assume that you are Christians. I assume that you read your Bible. I assume that you carry on your devotions. And there is more power on your side if you do than there ever will be on the power of the side of a pagan enemy. Whether that pagan enemy be outside our shores or next door to your house. Whether that pagan be in another government or in your own government. And now I've got a little comfort for you. And it's in this that we should find the direction of the activity of the conservatives in religion, first of all. And the king of Syria, I'm in 1 Kings 2 Kings 6, verse 8, warred against Israel and took counsel with his servants, saying, in such and such a place be my camp. And the man of God, the prophet Elisha, this is the prophet Elisha, sent unto the king of Israel, saying, beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down, again to attack Israel. And the king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God had told him and warned him of, and saved himself there, not once, but twice. Therefore the heart of the king, the attacker of Syria, was sore troubled for this thing, and he called his servants and said unto them, will ye not show me which of us is king of Israel, is for the king of Israel? The attacker against Israel wasn't doing very well, and he suspected his own officers. And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet that is in Israel, telleth the king of Israel, the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. Whoever had an espionage system like that? And he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And was told him, saying, behold, he's in Dothan. That's where Elisha was, the prophet of God. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about, trying to get at the prophet Elisha. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host encompassed the city with horses and chariots, and the servant said unto him, alas, my master, what shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Elisha was not afraid. He knew his God. His God was in his heart. He knew it would save Elisha and also Israel. And he didn't even have a sword. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots and of fire round about Elisha. This is what I ask you to do. The power that is with you will far exceed any power that any enemy has if you will call on your God. But you need to be able to see with the eye of faith in your God. Elisha saw this, but he had to ask God to show it to the servant who didn't have this. Your enemy is also the enemy of your God. That is, if this is your God. And one other little bit of comfort. In Ezekiel 11, you know, you wonder, and you hear a lot of people wonder, people that aren't communists are touting the communist line. They help the communists deliberately and inadvertently. It springs up all around you like a grass fire. Behind you, beside you, your friends, people you respect, are helping the communist line. And you can't understand it. You can understand it. And here it is. Ezekiel 11, verse 25. When I spake to them of the captivity, all the things the Lord had showed me. In Ezekiel 12, 1, the word of the Lord also came unto me, saying, Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of a rebellious house, which have eyes to see, and they see not. They have ears to hear, and they hear not, for they are a rebellious house. You see, wealthy people who are destroying themselves, they are destroying the economy that gave them their wealth, and you can't understand it. You see the clergy today, and let me qualify, I'm a Protestant. I was born a Protestant. And you don't hear this on the Protestant pulpit very much. It should be blasted in your ears every Sunday. And if you're not there, you ought to be there. And if it's not being blasted in your ears, it should be. Because herein lies your comfort. Not only your comfort, but the solution to the whole problem. The clergy's eye is blind. The learned professors who teach our young in the colleges, and you can go on and on. Why are they blind? Because when a man departs from the faith in his God, he can't see any longer. He doesn't know good from evil. This is what Solomon asked his God for, discernment between good and evil. That's why they can't see their own destruction. And now in St. John 12, the evil and the wicked, the unbelievers are blind. Verse 40, who makes them blind? God makes them blind when they depart from him. Verse 40, he hath blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, that they should not see with their eyes, nor understand with their heart, and be converted, that I should heal them. And now you remember the story of the destruction of Sodom. God decreed the destruction of Sodom because of their wickedness. God will decree the destruction of the United States when it's wicked. And it'll be done by the liberals. All the mechanics will be describable. It'll all be very logical, take place in logical sequence. But God will be doing it. And Abraham prayed for Sodom. And what did he say? Peradventure there be 50 righteous within the city. Wilt thou destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous therein? That be far from thee to do after this manner. And he goes on. And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within a city, I will spare it for their sakes. And Abram prayed some more. Would he do it? If there were 5 short, 45, he said he would do it. If there are 40, would he do it? Yes, he would do it for 40. Then he went down to 30. Would he do it? He went down to 20. You know the story. He went down to 10. He would still do it. Your God is a long-suffering God. Call on him. Ask him. I think you and I aren't doing that enough. In fact, I know it. That's why we're in a strait. Before long, we're going to be hiding in caves and in pits. He will spare the city for 10. That's a pretty low percentage. You know, while I was preparing this, I thought of a man we all respect, Douglas MacArthur. He was in Korea, fighting a situation created for him on difficult terrain with modern weapons, with jungle fighters. He conceived the idea of cutting them off by an attack from the shore. And he consulted with the Pentagon, I think. I don't know all the details. Probably you know them better than I. He consulted with all the top brass. They all warned him against such a thing. And he asked one thing: where's the most difficult spot to land? And I believe to this day that MacArthur consulted his God. He did exactly the opposite of what every man advised him to do. He landed at Incheon, didn't he? And he cut off the enemy and defeated them utterly and won the war in Korea, except now they wouldn't let him go on. He didn't do what men told him to do. I think that MacArthur consulted his God. You need to consult your God. All conservatives need to consult their God. And then I have one more. You know the story of Gideon. The same old story. Israel is in trouble, and Gideon is sent by God to defeat the pagan. And the Lord said unto Gideon in Judges 7, verse 2, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me. God knows his people. He knows they're weak in the faith. And if he lets them accomplish their mission by great numbers, they think they did it themselves, and they vaunt themselves against him. Now, therefore, he tells them to go proclaim it in the ears of the people, to depart early from Gilead, 22,000. He tells everyone who doesn't want to fight the battle to leave. 22,000 left, 10,000 remain. 22,000 were cowards. The Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down to the river, and I'll try them for you there. So he brought them down to the river. The Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself, likewise every one that boweth down upon his knees to drink. Remember the story about the bird dogs and the lap dogs by our Secretary of Commerce under a previous administration? God was using the same principle. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand. And let all the other people go every man to his place. Let them go home. They took victuals. They went down to surround the enemy, and they captured the enemy with some pitchers and some trumpets. And I don't need to relate to you the story. Thou shalt hear what they say, and afterward shall thine hands be strengthened to go down unto the host. There's another little aside here. Gideon lacked the faith. He was told to take a servant and become a scouting party of 2 to go to the enemy by night. And he heard what they said. And he heard them say, he heard, and I don't have the verse here, I think, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east lay along the valley like grasshoppers for multitude. And his fellow answered and said, this is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For unto his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. He heard this out of the mouth of the enemy. There's one thing I want you to remember. The enemy, the ungodly, and there are many ungodly who are not communists, and the communists themselves know better than you that you cannot be beaten if you have your God on your side, and if you are faithful to your God. Gideon had to hear this out of the mouth of the enemy before his faith was strong enough to proceed with his 300. And I don't need to tell you the result of that story. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. Gideon and 300 men against an enemy in number like the sand of the seashore. My fellow conservatives, this is my story. This is not my story. It's out of Old Testament history. It's been in the record all the time. If you haven't heard it, you've heard it now. Read it again and again. Preach it at every meeting. But be faithful to your God. Therein lies your victory and mine. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dykema, for your historical and biblical 4th of July message to America's patriots.